Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video. My sister is one of those extremely secretive people who people think have extremely interesting lives and are probably gang members that kill people during the night. She just gives off the vibe of someone that holds secrets, not for the sake of keeping them, but because they were too dangerous for other people to know. For the most part, I knew all of her secrets because I was the only exception to that rule, and I was always capable of seeing through her facade and telling when she was lying or keeping information to herself. My young mind enjoyed being the subject of an exception to an extent that made our relationship the strongest it could be, at least considering the circumstances. My mother passed away when I was roughly about 7 years old, and my dad has been struggling to manage 2 daughters with no experience handling girls as hard as he could. But he seems to be failing miserably as his relationship with both of us was in pathetic conditions. He wasn't a very good communicator, and he didn't acknowledge the existence of feelings and emotions, and always ran around hustling his work and shuffling his business ideas and projects instead of spending time with me and my sister and trying to get to know us, sender preferences, and possibly bond with us over them. We never really blamed him, nor did we care to look at him and feel sad about the fact that our relationship with him wasn't so good. Because we always had each other, or so I thought. The relationship between me and my sister was perfect enough to make her dad jealous of us, was evidently crumbling as I neared my 13th birthday. I was starting to notice the fake, untruthful facade my sister likes to serve other people was being used on me. Every time I would ask her what she was keeping from me or why she was lying to me, she would avoid the subject altogether or remain silent until I got tired and dropped the topic. Being as young as I was, and even though I was mature for my age, I know with no means no, and I stopped asking after a while. Only now, I wish I never had stopped and persisted until she either punched a hole through the wall using my body or told me the truth flat out. One day, I was expecting her to pick me up from school after a basketball game. It came to my surprise when my very punctual sister was 30 minutes late and then an hour, and then before I knew where I was pacing back and forth in front of the school at 8 p.m., waiting for my sister who had no plans of actually coming to get me. I walked back home shivering in the cold and terrified of the dark, ready to punch her in the face the moment my Iceland hit her for letting me wait in the rain so heartlessly. I got back home and screamed at her, name all the hallway, hoping she would rush downstairs, thirsty for an argument, so I could let out all the pent-up rage I had accumulated on my shameless walk of shame home. When I got no response from her nor my dad, I was starting to get concerned and thought that maybe something had kept them out or got them busy. My dad came home around 10 p.m., which is the time he usually gets back from work. My sister was nowhere to be found. The worst part was that my dad seemed to be bothered by the fact that his eldest daughter, who was barely in 19 and who was seemingly missing. She was supposed to pick me up and she didn't. He hadn't a clue where she might be, and her phone was turned off or out of service. Even my stupid, naive brain could put 2 and 2 together and induce myself with ungodly amounts of stress and anxiety. Here, my dad was chillaxed, unbothered, with zero visible stress or concern. The following day and the days that came after work filled with the same attitude, me being stressed beyond what human words could express, and my father being calm and collected and careless to the situation. I was barely 13 years old, and I could acknowledge that my sister could be somewhere out there ripped to pieces and dumped in a ditch, in a place where nobody could come across her or declare her body. I asked all of her friends I knew of hers at school if they knew where she was. I talked to her boyfriend and even went to the extent of asking her teachers if she had attended school the very last day I saw her. I even went to the police officers and told them that my sister was missing, but because my dad hadn't filed a complaint and she was a legal adult, they told me it was probably a problem between the two of them and she ran away, but she'd come back soon enough. They were obviously wrong because I spent the following few years crying myself to sleep, thinking my sister was dead and watching as my father went about living his life normally. I even started to question whether he was involved in her being missing, and it was certain of the fact that he knew where she was. If she had actually gone missing, the bare minimum that he would do was stress out every once in a while or not ignore me when I mentioned her name. Fast forward 10 years later. My father came into my room as I was packing my belongings to move out and informed me that I had a surprise waiting for me downstairs. I thought it was one of those moments in my life where he would either give me a car or the keys to an apartment or something I would never forget. It was something unforgettable. It was also something I wish I could forget. Downstairs read it for me my sister, that had aged relatively well, and a child that stood beside her, roughly reaching her waist. I'm pretty sure my reaction to her was priceless, as I looked her straight in the eyes and walked out the door, and she was just as surprised as I was. As I walked around the block in circles, I thought to myself that maybe the reason she left all of those years ago was because she had gotten herself pregnant and felt too embarrassed or humiliated to come forth with her truth. That ended up being the case, and my father explained to me that he was aware of her whereabouts all those years ago, that he insisted on letting me cry myself to sleep instead of at least telling me that she was all right or not dead, that he had left my 13, 14-year-old sister run around the city from police station to the other begging to help me find my sister instead of shoving me into a corner and telling me to stop because she was all right. For some reason or the other, her pregnancy seemed like something she couldn't share with me, even if it meant the world would end, something she specifically requested that my dad doesn't tell me unless he wants to never see her or her child again. For some reason, they both thought that drowning me in a world in which my mother was dead and the sister that I loved most was missing and possibly dead as well was the best idea their both ingenious selves could think of. Needless to say, I didn't go back home until I was certain neither of them would be there, fetched my things and left without any intention of speaking to either one of them again. I was invited to my cousin's engagement party, in which he promised me that neither one of them was invited. Only when I got there, I realized that there was no engagement party and that it was all a hoax to get me to sit down in the same room as my sister and father and solve a problem that they created, but left me to handle the consequences. When I told my family members that I was too freshly cut by my sister's return and too deeply wounded by the fact that they let me suffer all of those years from her absence, everybody looked down upon me and called me dramatic and said that I was exaggerating my reaction and thought it's not too bad and I shouldn't be so heartless and hard-headed. I don't blame them because nobody saw how distraught I was about my sister being missing. The only person who did see me was my dad, and the only one who would know how I would react was my sister. Yep, when I insisted on not speaking to either one of them, everybody else sided with them and strapped against me, completely disregarding my emotions and my arguments. It's been 2 months since that incident happened, and I haven't spoken to any members of my family, near or far. I have no intention of changing that because my life has been very stable and I've been lacking problems in almost every department, and I don't see a good reason for me to go back to them now and drown myself in sorrows again. Not the a-hole. This is such a weird story. Your family is kind of messed up and your mom's death was clearly problematic for your dad to a point where he didn't know how to handle either one of you and possibly thought that everything he was doing wrong and going in the wrong direction. When your sister presented him with a problem that he could fix on her behalf, he felt like he was being granted a good position in her life again and took it as soon as she proposed it to him. If she is as smart as you say she is, then she probably did it on purpose and manipulated him into going according to her plan. No, I can't figure out why she decided she wants you to stay oblivious to her whereabouts. I can definitely advise you to stay away from both of them because she possibly doesn't care about your emotions and your dad is too easily manipulatable to be around. Not the a-hole. Not sure if she shouldn't have stayed away from your extended family or not. They seem loving enough to accept your sister back with open arms even after having disappeared for 10 years without an explanation of any sort of contact. Your sister and dad need to stay away from you for a long time until they realize just how damaged you are by the knot that they created by excluding you. Not the a-hole. I can't believe your dad would see you suffering so much from your sister being missing and still manage to keep the information to himself, act as if he didn't know and pretend like she didn't matter to you or to him just so that he could adhere to a promise he gave her or feel as a good parent. That really is such a low blow, even for someone who would be jealous of his daughters having a good relationship and managing to feel happy around each other despite your mother being dead. The audacity of some people is just mind-blowing. This goes to show that being blood related to someone doesn't mean they will always do what's best for you and won't always care to preserve your emotions. Next story. Christmas Eve, my wife Sarah and I hosted my mother-in-law Jane and father-in-law Robert. Sarah and I are in our 40s and the in-laws are near 70. Every time we have them over, I have to remind Robert not to feed our dog table scraps. We don't want to promote begging. We are trying to keep her weight healthy and the dog has some allergies which requires expensive shots. Each time I have to remind Robert not to feed the dog from the table, he laughs and stops. Christmas Eve, I caught him again. I ask him like usual. He laughs. Some 20 minutes later, I see him sneak a piece of chicken off his plate. We do not feed the dog chicken at all because we think that is one of her allergy triggers. I told him again. I explain about the allergies and he plays dumb with a smirk on his face. I'm not happy. I leave to help my Sarah in the kitchen clean up and I look over and he effing does it again. Don't know what he gave her. At this point, I'm seeing red. How dare you come into my house and continually disrespect me? It's not like it's just me. Sarah has gone through this previously on other nights we hosted. I simply walked over to the table and said, I guess that concludes Christmas Eve. Have a good night. Everyone's jaw hit the floor. We hadn't done presents yet or desserts, yada yada yada. I explained that I told him twice tonight. I feel disrespected multiple times. Sarah is mad at me because I made that decision without talking to her. I admit, I was an a-hole, but I have seen her mom and stepdad walk all over her before, and we had discussed this very dog feeding issue after previous dinners. She doesn't stand up to them, and it's always next time. I also have to admit, it isn't just a dog feeding issue. I had to hear this out-of-touch man talk about an outdated view of the world. Poor people should just get better jobs, and a bunch of quasi-racist comments. I told Jane she could stay, but she wasn't going to take sides against her husband, and they drove together. When I saw it was 3 against 1, I just retired for the night. Sarah didn't talk to me until Christmas morning. I had embarrassed her in front of her family. I should have kept the peace until another time. He's an old man and forgets. Also, her brother and sister-in-law allow their dogs to get scraps. I stopped her and told her. I reminded him twice that night about the smirk and how he waited for the 3rd time for my back to be turned. I also told her how awful it is to have dinner at her brother's house because their giant dogs have their head in your lap, slobbering on you. It's gross. She understood better, but still thought I should have consulted with her and waited until it wasn't a holiday. Since they had plans with us, they would have nowhere to go. It wasn't a big deal and I went nuclear. Not the a-hole. I do think you should have consulted your wife first, but putting your beloved dog at risk and not respecting you or your house is not acceptable. Do not let internet opinions get to your head. Keep a cool mind and think things rationally and try to see everyone's perspective, be they right or wrong. Good luck. Not the a-hole. You admitted that you're the a-hole for doing what you did, but in the general whole of the story, not the a-hole. As a dog owner, I get this. How many times do you have to constantly ask someone not to feed your dog? Several times over several dinners, yeah? Someone needs to put their foot down. My dog won't come to the table unless someone is offering him something. If they're coming over to my house, they're agreeing to follow the house rules. I'm surprised your wife isn't concerned with the well-being of her dog and lets her dad do what he does. She should have stuck up for you in that regard. Yeah, you should have said something before you spoke up, but she should have also realized that her dad was potentially hurting her pet. Not the a-hole. I mean, what you did wasn't amazing, but I don't think it was truly a-hole behavior. He was doing it on purpose. He knowingly and willfully disrespected you and put your dog in danger. He's a huge a-hole, but you really should have either talked it over first or issued the ultimatum before pulling the trigger. Also, why didn't you just take your dog away from him? Put the dog behind a closed door and say enough is enough. It might feel like punishing the dog, but ultimately you would be protecting them. Next story. I, 32 female, had a baby 8 weeks ago, and since then, my mother-in-law has had a habit of popping by without calling first. I have anxiety at the best of times, but it's a bit worse right now, and when she comes over, particularly when my husband is at work and not there to mediate, I find her constant stream of advice and thinly veiled criticism. Example, looking intently at the floor while saying, "You must not have a vacuum cleaner. I'll bring one next time I'm over." To be just too much to handle. Both my husband and I have asked that she call before coming over, but she brushes it off, saying that the family shouldn't have to call. Last week, I was having a rough day and was tired, as the baby had been up at night more than usual. I looked out the bedroom window to see my mother-in-law walking through the front gate and honestly wanted to cry. I'm not proud of it, but I sat on the floor of the bedroom ignoring the doorbell until she went away. I felt really bad because she doesn't drive and I knew it would have taken her a 20-minute bus ride to get to our house, just to have to turn around and go back. Apparently, she called my husband at work to let him know that she tried to visit me because he called home to see if everything was okay. And I told him she must have come while I was out with the baby for a walk because I didn't want to admit that I had hidden from his mother. That evening, when he got home, he noticed that the baby's stroller was in the corner with the diaper bag in it, as he'd left it the previous day. So he figured out I hadn't taken the baby for a walk after all. I admitted that I hadn't answered the door for his mom, even though I was home, and he said he knows that she can be difficult, but it was still an a-hole move to make her spend 40 minutes on transit to not even see me or her grandchild. He brought it up a couple times over the holidays just to me, he didn't tell her, and now I feel like maybe I did something really awful. Edit. I know this isn't an advice sub, but regardless, the comments and messages I've received have been lovely and have really helped a lot. So thank you so much. Not the a-hole. And I would tell your husband you will do that each and every time she comes by without calling and getting your expressed permission going forward. It's completely unacceptable for her to show up at anyone's house without calling and confirming they are okay with it, especially that of a new mother. Beyond that, I would maybe start responding to her passive-aggressive comments bluntly. In your example, I would say, great then, when you bring a vacuum, you can vacuum next time. I agree for you to come over. That's such a great gift, mother-in-law, for you to willingly vacuum our house. Alternatively, you can say, I would appreciate no comments about the state of my house, especially when I did not agree to you coming over. Overall, get your husband to be aware you will do this going forward and he should let his mother know that is the course of action you both will be doing. Not the a-hole. You do not owe it to answer the door to anyone you did not specifically invite. You don't even need to hide or pretend you aren't there. You can straight up ignore them entirely. That said, you're an adult. You get to make your own choices and you do not owe anyone an explanation or excuse for anything. No is a complete sentence. You get to order your mother-in-law to leave. That is perfectly fine. Your husband needs to get his mother in line. Not the a-hole. Mother-in-law needs to learn boundaries. I don't care who you are. If you don't pre-schedule your visit with me, I have no obligation to be home, especially as you are a new mom. What an overwhelming time. You should not be subject to her passive-aggressive comments. If your husband feels bad that his mom wasted time on public transport, he should really have a conversation with her about not showing up without an invitation to do so. That way, she doesn't continue to waste her time on public transit, because I wouldn't budge on this. Good luck, mama.